communities. You think of graceful belfries, bells ringing on Sunday morning, stained glass windows, soft organ music, or do you ever think of the church in terms of pain and suffering, agony, and the need for a response to it?
Austin Faith Dialogue, a public affairs series at the crossroads of religion and life. Austin Faith Dialogue highlights the interaction of the religious community with the social and cultural issues in the area in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KTBC TV. Join us now for this week's edition of Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm John McCarthy, the Catholic Bishop of the Diocese of Austin. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to visit with you again today. I'm joined by Chris Attal, Director of Parish Social Ministry of the Diocese of Austin, and Pat Flood, Executive Director of Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We're going to be visiting with you today about an aspect of the life of the church that's extremely important, but some people don't necessarily think about it first when they think of the church. I said in the introduction that sometimes we think of the church as something, and we should, because that what I described at the beginning is very true. The church does represent calmness and beauty, meaning in life, a coming together in a sense of, with a sense of awe and reverence for God, the God that we worship, that all of us worship. But the church also has a responsibility day by day in the life of its members and the life of the larger community to deal with the human problems that beset life in the parish, in the synagogue, in the city, in the world in which we live. And the two people that our two guests this morning are intimately involved in that. Chris, first of all, you represent a ministry and a work inside the Catholic Diocese of Austin. We call it Parish Social Ministry. Could you describe that for us this morning?
Well, Bishop, as you know, when a Catholic parish is being formed, the priest usually calls his people together for liturgy, usually over a makeshift altar in a school gym. And when that important aspect of liturgy is taken care of, then the second thing that he might call for is education. CCD teachers to come forward and pass on the tradition to our children. What is often overlooked is the third and very important aspect of the church, which is the building of a caring, compassionate community of service to others. When Jesus taught us to love our neighbor as ourselves, he taught us by his works that our love needs to be expressed in that service. And so that linking of love and service in a very broad sense defines the social mission of the church. And that is a very important aspect of the church that sometimes is overlooked, or at least assigned to a committee, and not the entire parish is not enabled to perform that function.
Well, I know that a parish has a lot of, or any church has a lot of what we call internal needs. You know, you have to get a piece of property, you have to get a church built. Once it's built, you have some people who work full-time in ministry in the life of the church. And it's possible that you can be so consumed with your own internal needs that you put the needs of pain in the community sort of on the back burner. Do you experience that in any way?
That's absolutely correct, and it's not because people don't care about other people. It's just because, as you said, the details of everyday life of the parish take so much time. But what is needed, and there are lots of things already happening, as you well know, in outreach, but there's not a coordinated effort. So what we're trying to encourage through the development of parish social ministry or parish outreach is a concerted effort, a legitimizing of the social mission as an integral part of the parish function, that it become a part of the structure, that there be someone whose job it is to bring the entire parish.
A legitimizing. Does somebody think that this ministry or this effort is illegitimate?
Well, it tends to end up being done by a group of very dedicated people, but most people put their money in the basket as it passes once a month and feel that they've done everything they can do to help the poor in their community. When what we're being called to do is to really give of ourselves, and everyone has a gift that they can share with the community. So this is basically getting organized about it. The social ministry acts as an umbrella for all the social outreach, the social concerns activities within a parish, so that by putting into place that structure, then we're involving more of the laity in reaching out in a caring, compassionate way. So we're just getting more organized about it.
Pat, Chris represents one particular faith community, that of the Roman Catholic. You represent a much larger constituency, an ecumenical umbrella for this great area. Would you describe it for us, please? Austin Metropolitan Ministries.
Austin Metropolitan Ministry is about 125 congregations and organizations, religious organizations, but 95% of those are parishes of all different denominations. When legitimize, you use the term legitimize, and you challenge Chris on that. I think one of the questions in people's mind when they're involved in religion is social ministry, is caring for the poor, an essential part of being a religious person, of being a Christian. And I think we would say, and we believe, out of the scripture, that it is. It's a part of the very essence of what it means to be a religious person, to be a Christian, to be a Catholic within the community. And so Austin Metropolitan Ministries then kind of escalates that and says that the religious community has a responsibility to the total community around ethics, around values, around speaking to needs of people who are left out, who fall through, what kind of quality of life is within the community. And the religious community is the touchstone in the conscience there. And then the second thing it does is communicates that between them. And thirdly, it initiates efforts within the community that reflect that concern for public need, such as at-risk youth or gang intervention or dealing with the elderly or AIDS ministry or many of the things. And the exciting thing about Austin Metropolitan Ministry is that it is ecumenical, that it is a struggle within the religious community to work together, and that's a struggle. And secondly, it is lifting up the very essence of what it means to be religious, to build community, to affect quality of life in community, in the total community. And we're that form when that
When you
takes place.
started, Pat, you referred to concern about the poor, and that confused me for a moment. Later on you mentioned problems with AIDS and gangs and things like that, because I would think that as important as assistance to people who are in poverty is, that this type of work that y'all are involved in is not limited to poor people. The incidence of alcoholism in affluent churches is probably as high as any other part of the city. Loneliness, isolation, divorce, those are all problems that mark modern American urban life. So you have a wide range of interests that go beyond.
I think another common term would be human need. And poor of the spirit as well as poor economically, as physically poor, is part of our purpose. But, you know, Pat Hayes, president of St. Edward's University, pointed out and gave a talk to the clergy at one of our sessions that it is a sign of pointing the finger of an indictment that within Austin, 30% of the population are poor, are economically poor. And a community which prides itself in being who it is, concerned about rights of people and quality of life, to tolerate 30% of the poor and kind of shut one's eye, that economic reality becomes a touchstone of the quality of life that exists within the community.
Well, in the United States, there are more white Anglos who are poor than any other group, but that's because that particular segment of our population is so large. Numerically, but in this state, for the most part, people who find themselves in poverty are people in minority communities. And that has to relate to problems in education and, quite frankly, the persisting problem of racism in our society. Do you see your churches and your ecumenical organization or your parishes, Chris, involved in dealing with the problems of racism and prejudices, along with assisting people with, I don't know exactly how you function, emergency food, housing, jobs? Do you also confront the underlying social issues, or endeavor to deal with the underlying social issues that has caused so much of the poverty with which we suffer.
You may want to address what's happening at St. Julia's.
Yeah, we have, well, St. Julie Catholic Church is a member of Austin Metropolitan Ministry, along with 11 other Catholic parishes, among those 125. But there is a commission on racial justice that has been designated as such within the group. And racism is a very subtle, slippery type of thing to put your hand on. What is racist and what isn't racist? Is racism viewed as an attitude, a perception, a personal, intimate personal relationship type of thing? Or is there such thing as systemic racism, exclusion from the economic system? East Austin. And what this commission is doing is trying to get at that, raise up the question, where does racism relate to exclusion and hiring, dropout rate, lack of prenatal care, racism?
Forgive me, Pat, but if you're going to deal with that, the church can't deal with the lack of prenatal care as such, and some of the other things. You're moving over into the area of public policy, how the state of Texas is going to deal with some of these problems, how Travis County is going to deal with them, maybe how the United States of America is going to deal with them. Do your churches concern themselves with public policy? Do you?
Absolutely. We would say that the church has to be intimately involved and speak to public policy. And they speak to it not by remedying it and initiating a program, the amount of financial resources needed for this, but speak to it from what kind of quality of life is the government expected to provide for all its citizenry, the dignity of each individual. The whole Judeo-Christian message relates to the importance of the individual, and then that gets formulated into how public policy is implemented in the city.
Chris, it sounds to me like not everybody would agree with his understanding of the First Amendment. Isn't that a problem of the tradition of separating church and state in this country?
I'll take them
on,
but if you want to, Chris, go right ahead.
Well, I would like to add that advocacy, or the trying to change and impact public policy, is really the other side of the coin from the direct service that we talked about to the poor, that they're very inseparable. Because when someone can put a face on the problem, then they can see what things impacted to cause that problem in the first place, and you can't help but get involved. So they're really two sides of the coin, so we are obligated.
But we're all comfortable with one side. You don't have any trouble when you talk to people about Christmas baskets. Everybody will give you something for a Christmas basket, or to a contribution towards a drug abuse program or something like that. But when you start tampering with the structures of our society, when you challenge whether or not the school system is achieving its goals, whether or not a particular legislation aid to dependent children, for example, is adequate in terms of the needs of the target group that it's supposed to assist, then you've gone from preaching to meddling. And I wonder if that's a problem, probably more for you, Pat, in terms of an ecumenical organization than it might be for Chris inside the Roman Catholic Church.
Well, I wouldn't say that even for Chris, not even for Chris functioning within the Roman Catholic Church, because the Roman Catholic Church has taken a very strong stand on public policy and social teaching, and that it should be involved in the issues that affect people's lives. We are very strong supporters of the separation of church and state. The Southern Baptists, or the Baptists in the United States, have practically invented the term and brought it out, separate church and state. And we would adhere to that. There's strong membership. But separate church and state meant that there would not be a state religion. Separation of church and state means that we do not, as church, and as a nonprofit 501c3 and all of those significant things, participate in partisan politics. We as church are not Democrats or are not Republican or not socialist or libertarian or whatever caste in between. But it does not. In fact, the Constitution and the way the church has functioned in speaking to human issues within society and the shortfall of government, which is the embodiment of the people, the public, and many of our Protestant churches are very much into the democratic mode. In fact, the democratic process in the United States came out of the Presbyterian Church and out of the Congregational Church really has been very much present, along with the Catholics, in dealing with issues of public policy. And it's done by, to get into a very controversial one, and I'm sure people will get riled up about that, and bring it back to racism, environmental racism in East Austin. What about the environment, the pollution of the land, and the resultant effect on the lives of individuals there? That has been tolerated, that is a shortcoming, that is something that has to be remedied at a broader level.
Be more specific. Are you saying that it was not likely that those refineries or storage instruments would have been located in West or North Austin? Is that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely saying that, and I think in the history of this city as well as any other city in the United States, there are certain locales where you located this type of thing. The effects of the location may not have been known extensively at the time, but the lack of care to even find out probably is part of the reason.
That brings up another organization that's not represented here today, but I'll put in a word for them, and that's this whole thrust of Austin Interfaith, which says neighborhoods have to protect themselves, where men and women marry and raise their children and send their children to school. That's something very sacred to their lives. And in the past, neighborhoods, especially poor neighborhoods, have not really known how to do that. I think Austin Interfaith's record in San Antonio and Houston, El Paso, the Valley, and even here in Austin is a model of how ordinary working people can get together and protect their interests. Let's come to, I think we've touched a lot on the philosophy of your work and ministry. Let's talk about the concrete aspects of it. Chris, I know that you have been a leader here in the city and trying to get churches, and Pat, I know you're involved as well, trying to get churches involved in the problems of homelessness. That's a wide problem that involves many different types of people who are homeless. But I know there's a special interest in families that have been suddenly made homeless primarily by economic contraction, that they've lost their jobs, they've lost their houses, they've run through their unemployment insurance, and yet they're people that can really be helped. Would you talk to us about your own work in that field?
The coordinators, parish social ministry coordinators in the parishes that I've been working with, which are primarily in East Austin, have seen a lot of people coming to them for help, and the majority of those people are single women with several children who have no access to a secure place to live, and oftentimes are bunking in, so to speak, with their families. And what we're trying to do is to provide education to the people in the parish to enable them to access the resources that are out there. Excuse me. And to know what kinds of things these people are entitled to have, and to bring the whole community to bear on trying to help them access those resources. The Homeless Project itself is, we're trying to encourage each parish to adopt a family, to not necessarily to do everything for them that they need to have to become self-sufficient, but to empower them to make some of those choices themselves, and to maybe support them for the term of a year, maybe, or whatever it takes to get them back on their feet, but to help them, link them into the resources that can help them.
How does a parish of 2,000 or 3,000 people relate to an individual family?
That's why you have to have some organization. Ideally, you would have an office of parish social ministry in your parish that is led by a coordinator who is a member of the parish staff. That person then begins to lead the parish in a process of analyzing what resources they have available. And I'm talking about people resources, not necessarily financial resources, because everyone is gifted in some way, and all those gifts can be brought to bear. So that there's developed a core group of volunteers that maybe might come into that office and be there, be present to people, to listen to their problems. Many times people come in because they need somebody to talk to, and they can help kind of work out their own problems. It's not just a handout. It's, how can we help you to decide?
Well, I know that here in Austin, there are other organizations, HOBO, the Foundation for the Homeless, the Rapid Learning Institute, that are concerned about the same subject. Do y'all connect in any way? Do you communicate with them?
Yes, we've been working very closely with them, and that's one of the things I think that's beautiful about Austin, is that there is such a spirit of cooperation. All these agencies have come together and are willing to work with the parish to maybe show them how to do case management, if that's what the technical term you want to give it, but to show the parish how to help a family, to maybe teach them how to sit down and talk to them about some of their long-term goals, and to encourage them to move, to maybe make some adjustments in their own life and encourage them to save and put them in touch with other agencies that are working in that area. So there's a very cohesive group of agencies that are willing to work and come into the parish and train the parish committee to help each other.
I certainly wish you every success with that, Chris. It's an agonizing problem in our society. We're so wealthy. We talk in terms about our limited resources, and certainly they are limited, but in terms of just being able to deliver a roof and food and a certain amount of human dignity, we can certainly do better than we're doing at the present time. Pat, I know that Austin Metropolitan Ministries is in a wide range. How about being specific on some of the things? You mentioned AIDS earlier. And I know I remember a program I saw in the Austin American Statesman about hands-on housing. Could you describe a few of those programs for us?
One comment on emergency assistance, that Caritas would be another agency that would be there. One thing that the religious community should hold its head up high, there's so much more to do, and the need is great. But the religious community has been the glue in responding to emergency needs with those agencies that you talk about in congregational and parish involvement. Hands-on housing would be a part of that spectrum. Hands-on housing deals with persons who are nearing moving into homelessness. It's with an home ownership by the working poor or unemployed families or older people who own their homes, of which there are many in Austin, and who cannot maintain it, and they're on the way to eliminate the housing stock or becoming homeless. It's a large program. We will, in 1992, do 70 homes is the goal in East Austin on May 2nd.
What do you mean you will do them?
There are teams that are organized out of parishes. There will be 70 parishes with 15 to 20 people. This includes 1,000 people altogether who will come together on one day and be matched with a home and with the family and with the people. And of course that whole program does much more.
Now the house is already there. You're not talking about habitat, building houses. You're talking about refurbishing houses of older people who are poor, can't afford to do it themselves?
The different Habitat is a very good program, well known, that builds new houses, about 5 a year and from scratch.
Some guy named Carter works for them.
That's right. Hands-on housing is a local effort under Austin Metropolitan Ministries, which enlists teams to rehabilitate homes that are already existing. Habitat is not in the rehabilitation business. And we would reach out to, 70 a year. It's a tremendous program, more so from the standpoint of building community and relatedness and bringing the diverse sections of the community together, as well as actually preserving housing for a person who can live a better life. We're involved in...
Tell me about, I think it's great that an elderly couple, hardly able to move around, look out there one day and see wonderful, I bet for the most part these are younger people. I'm sure it's not limited to that. Suddenly fixing a fence and repairing a poor. What about the people who are working on it? What effect does that have on them?
To cite an example, there was one home where a woman, very fine-looking Latino woman, a grandmother, lived. The sink went into a bucket and you threw the water out. It didn't drain out. And so you had to build a sewage line out, or drainage pipe. Now this home is 40, 50, 60 years old, and she's lived on that site for 40, 50 years. So you had the Presbyterians putting on the front porch, you had the Catholics painting the house, and you had the Mormons digging the ditch for the drainage system. Well, the relationship that is built between those groups... You set me up
for about 4 jokes.
Yes, I know. It's all there. And you had the family there working with those folks, of the woman. And so you had a little microcosm of all the kinds of people that exist. Another home was a woman whose porch was falling off but has not had hot water for a long time, for a year and a half. And Temple Beth Israel was in charge of that. Okay, it was interesting to see a doctor and a lawyer and a teacher trying to figure out how should we remove this board, or will the porch fall off, or what to do. It never put into that necessarily immediate crisis stage. and at the same time building community and resourcing. So it's much bigger.
If somebody is 22 years old, 24 years old from West Austin and has lived with some degree of comfort all of their life, and they come into a neighborhood that has this deteriorating housing, and they see elderly people who are no longer able to take care of themselves, it must expand their horizons and help them grow as human beings. So my opinion, I've watched this for the last 35 years now in different parts of the United States. I find that the persons who are, in quotation marks, doing the good are the people who benefit the most from it. Do you find that in your own experience with your people that are working with you to help others, that we are the beneficiaries?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it puts a human face, and the human face goes both ways. You know, it's the very gracious person who really can teach the persons who are coming in what life is about, exchanges with
well, we don't have a great deal of time. I'd like from each one of you a brief statement about how this is where people of faith, religious people, of all religious persuasions can come together to develop commonality and a sense of trust. Do you see that in your work? That's a rhetorical question, I guess, because I'm probably answering it, but I want it from your perspective. Does this bond us, not as Presbyterians, Jews, or Catholics, but as human beings who have a common respect for each other?
I think absolutely. There already is a lot of networking between the churches of different faiths. Excuse me, just in the area of trying to build a resource network. And we're already working together and talking about that because they're seeing the same problems in their churches that the Catholics are seeing.
Patrick?
Yes, it does. There's a moral illiteracy in the land, in a sense, where some of our structures are falling apart. And not bringing up that sense of community commitment. We're within the process of building community, and I think the religious community fulfills that role of helping lift up that value system. So it's very much part of bringing community together. That's the most exciting part of what we do.
You like your work?
Very much.
Chris?
Absolutely.
God bless both of you. Chris Attal from the Diocese of Austin and Pat Flood from Austin Metropolitan Ministries. We've been visiting with you this morning on a subject that many of us are very familiar with and used to, and yet for others of us there's a certain amount of surprise that the church not only gathers on Sunday or Saturday, depending on the case, the church and synagogue to worship God, but we look around us in the world in which we're living, and we see pain and injustice, loneliness, isolation, hunger, a whole list of sources of pain in the human condition. And the churches and the synagogues are coming out of the ancient tradition of the prophets and the message of Jesus Christ, who when his own, those listening to him wouldn't accept his teaching, he said, look at what I do. Look at my works, because they speak of whence I come. And so throughout the centuries, beginning with the Old Testament prophets, continuing until today, people of faith look for the opportunity to lessen pain because of their love of their brothers and sisters and because of their love of God. Thank you once again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
For more information, call Austin Metropolitan Ministries at 472-7627.